Trump insults a Korean man at the airport, not knowing he's Kim Jong-un's brother, North Korean leader. We dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the end of February. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this dream too. The airport hummed with the usual chaos of travelers hurrying to their gates, luggage wheels rolling over polished floors, and the occasional garbled announcement over the intercom. Donald Trump, dressed in a crisp navy suit, strode confidently through the VIP lounge, his signature golden hair slicked back. He was on his way to a high-profile business event in Asia, but as always, his presence drew murmurs and curious glances. He reveled in it. After all, he was a man of status, power, and, in his own mind, untouchable influence. Sitting quietly in a corner of the lounge was a man of medium height, dressed in an understated yet expensive dark suit, his jet black hair neatly combed. He had a composed, almost unreadable expression, his gaze flicking occasionally toward the crowd. The man exuded an air of quiet authority, but in a place where Western elites dominated, few paid him any attention. That was until Trump's sharp gaze landed on him. Trump's instinctive arrogance kicked in. He smirked as he approached the man, his voice carrying across the room with the confidence of someone who had never second-guessed himself. "Hey, buddy, what do you think you're doing here? This lounge is for VIPs, not?" He paused, tilting his head mockingly. "People like you. Where'd you learn English? China? Korea? Japan? What? Do you work a laundromat or something?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. A few gasps were muffled by the sheer shock of his audacity. The man, however, remained unshaken. His dark eyes met Trump's, unwavering and patient, as if he were carefully assessing an unworthy opponent. Then, in a calm, measured tone, he spoke. "I see you still assume power means intelligence. An unfortunate misconception." Trump blinked, momentarily thrown off by the man's eloquence. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "Oh, so you do speak English? Well, whatever. Just don't take up too much space, all right? This isn't one of your rice paddies." A murmur rippled through the lounge. Some travelers pulled out their phones, recording the unfolding scene. The Korean man remained poised, his expression betraying nothing. He simply inclined his head slightly and said, "Interesting. You insult a stranger without knowing who he is. Do you always act before thinking, Mr. Trump?" Trump let out a scoff, waving a dismissive hand. "Who cares? You're probably some businessman trying to play with the big dogs. Trust me, I've dealt with your kind before. Just be grateful I'm even talking to you." As Trump turned away, a young man in a black suit approached the Korean man and whispered something in his ear. The man gave a small nod, then turned back to Trump with an enigmatic smile. "You'll find out soon enough," he said, his voice as steady as ever. "You always do." For the first time in a long time, Trump felt something unfamiliar, a creeping sense of unease. As Trump strutted toward the exit of the VIP lounge, a low hum of whispers trailed behind him. Some of the passengers had already begun discreetly sharing their videos online, while others exchanged concerned glances. They knew Trump's arrogance was nothing new, but there was something about the Korean man's demeanor that unsettled them. He had remained eerily composed, too composed. Seated near the lounge's entrance, a high-ranking intelligence officer named Mark Holloway tapped his phone screen nervously, scrolling through an encrypted message that had just arrived. His sharp blue eyes flickered toward the Korean man, who sat unmoved, sipping his tea as if nothing had happened. Mark's gut twisted in a way that only years of classified intelligence work could induce. He had seen that face before. His hands clenched instinctively. "Oh, hell," he muttered under his breath. Rising quickly, he pushed past the lounge's thick leather seats and made his way toward Trump, who was now laughing at something his assistant had said. "Mr. Trump," Mark called, his tone sharp and urgent. "A word." "Now." Trump turned with an air of impatience, rolling his eyes. "What is it, Holloway? Can't you see I'm busy being adored?" Mark leaned in, his voice a near whisper. "Sir, the man you just insulted? You need to leave. Immediately." Trump let out a short, amused laugh. "Why? What, is he going to sue me? Let me guess, another crybaby liberal?" He looked like one of those peace and love types. Whatever. Mark's face remained tense. That's not just some businessman, sir. He inhaled deeply, as if steadying himself. That's Kim Jong-un's older brother. For the first time in years, Trump actually froze. He blinked, his brain struggling to process the words. Then he scoffed. That's ridiculous. Kim Jong-un's brother? The guy was killed years ago. Poisoned in some airport or whatever. Everybody knows that. Mark shook his head. Not this brother. He was kept in the shadows for years, unknown to the world. A ghost hidden by North Korea's elite. His real name is Kim Jae-hyuk. And trust me, sir, he's not someone you want to mess with. Trump narrowed his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty passing through him. Why didn't the CIA tell me about this? Mark exhaled sharply. Sir, the CIA tried. You just didn't read the briefing. Trump's lips pressed into a thin line. That's fake news. It's a fact, sir. Mark's voice lowered further, his words now barely audible. Jae-hyuk has more power than you think. Unlike his younger brother, he was trained in international affairs, espionage, and negotiation. He's the one who controls North Korea's real financial operations, the one with ties to China, Russia, and a web of underground intelligence. He's the man the world never saw coming. Trump swallowed, but quickly masked his discomfort with a dismissive wave. Okay, so what? He's still just a guy. What's he gonna do? Cry to his little dictator brother? Please. Mark took a step closer. Sir, you just publicly humiliated the secret power behind North Korea. You don't understand what you've done. Trump's smirk faltered. The unease from earlier was now gnawing at his gut. He turned his head slightly, stealing a glance back at the Korean man, Jae-hyuk, who was still sitting there, calmly watching the scene unfold. His eyes, dark and calculating, met Trump's in an almost taunting way. And then, for the first time in years, Donald Trump felt something he hadn't truly experienced before. Fear. The walls of the airport suddenly felt closer, the air heavier. Trump pulled at his collar, adjusting his tie as if it could somehow loosen the tension creeping up his spine. He refused to admit it. He would never admit it, but Mark's words had shaken him. His instinct was to brush it off, to double down, but something about Jae-hyuk's unwavering calm sent a warning through his gut that even his ego couldn't ignore. With forced bravado, he scoffed. Okay, so let's say this guy really is Kim Jong-un's brother. Big deal. North Korea is a joke. What's he gonna do? Launch a missile over an insult? Mark's jaw clenched. Sir, this isn't just about an insult. This is about optics, power, and international relations. You humiliated him in public. In Korean culture, public disgrace isn't just an embarrassment. It's an offense that demands correction. Trump waved a hand dismissively. Whatever. I'm the king of comebacks, remember? I can fix this. Maybe I'll invite him to Mar-a-Lago. Let him play a round of golf. See what real power looks like. Mark exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. Sir, this isn't one of your reality shows. You don't get to fix this with a handshake and a photo op. North Korea doesn't work like that. And Jae-hyuk isn't the kind of man who lets things slide. Trump turned, his face twisting into irritation. You're overreacting. I know how to handle people like him. Before Mark could reply, a deep, controlled voice interrupted. Mr. Trump. Both men turned sharply. Kim Jae-hyuk was now standing just a few feet away. His posture was relaxed, his hands clasped in front of him. The tailored suit, the watch peeking from beneath his sleeve, it all spoke of quiet power. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes, the kind that concealed more than it revealed. Trump straightened his shoulders, shifting back into the posture of a man who believed he was in control. Ah, you again, he said, flashing his usual grin. What? You want an autograph or something? Jae-hyuk chuckled, low and almost amused. No, Mr. Trump. I wanted to personally thank you. Trump blinked. Thank me? Jae-hyuk nodded slowly. Yes, for reminding me that the world is still filled with men who mistake volume for power. His eyes darkened slightly, the amusement flickering into something sharper. But power, true power, is not in words. Mark subtly stepped forward, his instincts kicking in. Mr. Kim, he interjected carefully, I believe we may have had a misunderstanding earlier. I'd be happy to facilitate a discussion. Jae-hyuk lifted a hand, silencing him with a mere gesture. His gaze remained locked on Trump. Men like you, he said smoothly, believe influence is a game of bravado. But let me share something with you, Mr. Trump. Influence is built in silence, in the shadows, and, when necessary, he tilted his head slightly. It erases noise. Trump felt a cold chill slide down his spine. It was the way Jae-hyuk spoke, the absolute certainty in his voice. This wasn't some politician playing power games in the media. This was a man who operated on a different level entirely, a level where consequences weren't debated. They were executed. Jae-hyuk took a step closer, his smile never wavering. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Trump, he said, voice as smooth as glass. I have a feeling your journey is about to take a rather unexpected turn. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if he had never been there at all. Trump stood frozen for a moment before snapping back to reality. He turned to Mark, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. All right, he muttered. I need to know exactly who the hell this guy really is. And I need to know now. Mark swallowed. Sir, that's what I've been trying to tell you. You might have just made the biggest mistake of your life. Trump stormed toward the security checkpoint, his irritation mounting with every step. The VIP treatment he usually received felt meaningless now. Jae-hyuk's words lingered in his mind like a shadow, a weight he couldn't shake off. He wasn't afraid. He refused to admit fear. But something about that Korean man felt different. Mark Holloway stayed close, his movements sharp and alert. He had already sent a classified request to intelligence contacts, demanding every shred of information on Kim Jae-hyuk. But deep down, he already knew the truth. This was a man they had never fully accounted for. A ghost in the political sphere. And ghosts, by definition, didn't follow the rules. As they approached the private terminal, a sleek, government-chartered Boeing 757 waited on the tarmac, engines humming. The pilot stood at the base of the stairs, giving Trump his usual respectful nod. Sir, we're ready for takeoff. Trump exhaled through his nose, straightening his tie and shaking off whatever lingering thoughts had crept in. Good. Let's get the hell out of here. He stepped onto the staircase, his polished shoes clicking against the metal. But just as he reached the cabin door, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Instinctively, he pulled it out. A text message. Unknown number. Enjoy the flight, Mr. Trump. I suggest you don't sleep too deeply. A cold sensation prickled at the back of his neck. He immediately turned to Mark, shoving the phone in his face. You seeing this? Mark's face tightened. He snatched the phone and ran a quick trace, but the result came back blank. It's untraceable. Trump scowled. Son of a... He cut himself off, inhaling sharply. All right, fine. Let's just get in the air. As soon as they were seated, the engines roared to life, and the plane began taxiing. The flight crew moved with routine efficiency, serving drinks, ensuring security was in place. The familiar sounds of takeoff, the deep rumble of acceleration, the slight pressure against the seat, should have been comforting. But something felt wrong. 15 minutes into the flight, Mark's phone pinged. A new intelligence update had arrived. His eyes scanned the encrypted file, his face draining of color as he read the details. Kim Jae-hyuk was more than just an influential figure in North Korea. He had direct ties to the most covert operations in East Asia. Cyber warfare, black market arms deals. Entire intelligence agencies feared his reach. And the last person who had publicly embarrassed him had disappeared. Mark clenched his jaw. He looked up at Trump, who was scrolling mindlessly through his phone, pretending he wasn't worried. Sir, Mark said, his voice tight, we need to land. Now. Trump's head snapped up. Are you crazy? Listen to me. Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. I don't know what's about to happen, but we need to change course. This flight is compromised. Trump scoffed. Compromised? This is a government plane. Who's going to touch me? The sky police. Mark wasn't laughing. He was already signaling to the pilot through a secure line. Divert course. Immediately. But before the pilot could respond, the cabin lights flickered. Then, the monitors on the walls went black. A single message flashed onto the screen. You were warned. The plane suddenly jerked, the engines sputtering for a split second before regaining power. Flight attendants gasped, gripping onto the seats. Trump's eyes widened. What the hell was that? Mark's voice was ice cold. Sir, we just lost control of the autopilot. Trump's face paled for the first time. What do you mean lost control? Mark turned to him, his expression grim. I mean someone else is flying this plane now. The realization hit like a gut punch. Trump wasn't in control anymore. And for the first time in his life, he truly understood what fear felt like. Panic rippled through the cabin as the realization sank in. Someone else was in control of the plane. The hum of the engines remained steady, but the eerie silence from the cockpit sent a chilling message. The flight crew exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. Trump shot up from his seat, face flushed with anger and disbelief. This is my plane. You tell that pilot to get his ass on a radio and fix this. Mark Holloway was already steps ahead, pushing toward the cockpit door. He pounded his fist against it. Captain, what's happening up here? Report now. No response. He pulled out his government-issued phone and accessed the emergency override system, designed to reconnect pilots with air traffic control. The screen flickered, lines of code running across it before a message appeared. Access denied. Mark's heart pounded. He turned back to Trump. Sir, listen to me carefully. This is no ordinary hack. Whoever did this has control over every system on this aircraft. We're in their hands now. Trump scoffed, shaking his head. No way. That's impossible. This is a government jet. Mark, we've got the best security, the best technology. It's probably just a glitch. Some nerd in IT screwing up. Just as the words left his mouth, the cabin speakers crackled. A voice, smooth and calculated, filled the air. Mr. Trump. A cold shiver ran through Mark's spine. He knew that voice. Kim Jae-hyuk. Trump's eyes darted toward the speakers. How the hell is this guy talking through my plane? Jae-hyuk chuckled softly. Oh, Mr. Trump, you still don't understand, do you? This was never your plane. From the moment you insulted me in that lounge, it was mine. Trump clenched his jaw, forcing a smirk. Big talk, pal. You don't scare me. You think you can hijack my flight and get away with it? You have no idea who you're messing with. A brief pause. Then, the voice returned, calm and unwavering. Oh, but I do, Mr. Trump. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who has spent his life believing power is measured in applause and headlines. A man who assumes fear is something he only causes, not something he feels. Mark noticed Trump's fingers twitch slightly. A tell. A weakness. Jae-hyuk continued, his voice growing softer, almost condescending. Tell me, Mr. Trump, how does it feel? To be powerless? To know that, at this moment, your fate is in my hands. Trump's lips pressed into a thin line, his face a mix of anger and something else, something dangerously close to uncertainty. Mark took a step forward, his voice controlled. What do you want, Jae-hyuk? Money? A political deal? There's no way you went through all this trouble just for revenge. A quiet chuckle. Ah, Agent Holloway. Always so quick to negotiate. But no, I do not seek money, nor politics. What I seek is understanding. Trump rolled his eyes. Oh, give me a break. What? You're going to teach me some ancient Korean wisdom now? Jae-hyuk ignored the comment. You see, Mr. Trump, men like you are fascinating. You assume strength is in bluster, that dominance is in volume. But true power? True power is knowing when to be silent, when to watch, when to wait, and when to act. The plane suddenly dipped, sending a jolt through the cabin. Gasps filled the room as passengers clutched their seats. Trump grabbed onto the armrest, his bravado cracking. You son of a... I suggest you listen very carefully now. Jae-hyuk interrupted, his tone now sharper. Because what happens next depends entirely on you. Mark held up a hand to Trump, signaling for him to shut up. We're listening. Another pause. Then Jae-hyuk's voice turned almost amused. Good. Then let's begin. The cabin lights dimmed, the screens flickered again, and the plane continued its steady, controlled descent toward an unknown destination. And for the first time in his life, Donald Trump had no idea where he was going or if he would survive a landing. The engines of the Boeing 757 hummed steadily as the aircraft continued its descent. Trump gripped the leather armrest of his seat, his knuckles whitening as the reality of the situation set in. He wasn't in control. For the first time in his life, he was the one being played. Mark Holloway kept his eyes on the cabin screen, watching as a digital map flickered on and off, failing to show their current location. The cockpit remained silent, locked away from them, as if the pilots were no longer in command. The only sound in the cabin was the occasional gas from the flight attendants and the murmurs of confusion among the staff. Then, the speakers crackled again. "You are approaching a moment of clarity, Mr. Trump." Jae-hyuk's voice came through, calm as ever. "How does it feel to be a passenger in your own life?" Trump clenched his jaw. "You think this scares me? I've been in worse situations. I've had the fake news against me. I've had the deep state trying to take me down. And guess what? I always win." He forced a smirk. "You're just another guy who thinks he's smarter than me. But you'll learn. Everyone does." A soft chuckle. "Your resilience is amusing," Jae-hyuk said. "But let's see how strong you truly are when the ground rushes toward you." The plane lurched. Screams filled the cabin as the aircraft dropped sharply, the sudden turbulence throwing some of the attendants off their feet. Glasses shattered, luggage compartments popped open, and Trump felt his stomach flip as gravity twisted against him. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared, gripping the seatbelt across his lap as the plane continued its wild descent. Mark slammed his hand against the emergency controls, trying to regain a signal to the cockpit. "Jae-hyuk, if you crash this plane, you die too." Jae-hyuk's voice remained eerily calm. "Who said anything about crashing?" Just as suddenly as it had dropped, the plane leveled out. The cabin was silent, save for the uneven breathing of those on board. The tension was suffocating. Mark glanced at Trump, who was now visibly rattled, his usual arrogance replaced by something closer to disbelief. A soft chime echoed through the speakers, and the screens in the cabin flickered back to life. This time, they showed a satellite image, a live feed of a massive, desolate island surrounded by endless ocean. "This is your new destination," Jae-hyuk announced. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Where the hell is this?" Jae-hyuk ignored the question. "Prepare for landing." The plane tilted slightly, descending toward a sleek, isolated airstrip in the middle of nowhere. The island looked completely uncharted, with no visible cities, no recognizable landmarks. Trump leaned forward, glaring at the screen. "What's the point of all this? You kidnapped me to bring me to some random island? What, you got a bunker here? Some secret North Korean hideout?" He forced a laugh, but his voice carried an undeniable edge. "Oh, Mr. Trump," Jae-hyuk murmured, "you still believe you're the most powerful man in the room. That is your greatest weakness." The wheels touched down with a jolt, the plane rolling to a smooth stop on the isolated runway. The cabin doors unlocked with a loud click. And then, for the first time, Jae-hyuk's voice turned chillingly direct. "Step outside. Your lesson begins now." Mark exchanged a tense glance with Trump, then slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. "Sir, we don't have a choice." Trump swallowed hard, his bravado faltering. The doors slid open, revealing an empty tarmac under the dim glow of twilight. The humid air outside felt heavy, unfamiliar. As Trump hesitated at the exit, a row of black SUVs suddenly pulled up, their headlights cutting through the night. And then, stepping out of the lead vehicle, was Kim Jae-hyuk himself, dressed impeccably, his expression unreadable, waiting, watching, and ready to teach a lesson Trump would never forget. Trump hesitated at the aircraft door, his feet planted firmly on the threshold. He wasn't used to this, being unsure, being forced into a situation where he wasn't calling the shots. His usual bravado told him to stride forward, to take control. But something about Kim Jae-hyuk's presence made him pause. Mark Holloway stepped beside him, his jaw tight. "Sir, we need to move. Standing here makes us look weaker." Trump sucked in a breath, straightened his tie, and stepped onto the tarmac. The humid air wrapped around him like an invisible shroud, thick with tension. The runway was eerily quiet. No airport staff, no flashing signals. Just a series of black SUVs parked in formation, their tinted windows concealing whatever lay within. Jae-hyuk stood at the center, hands clasped in front of him, his suit pristine despite the oppressive climate. His expression was calm, unreadable. He watched Trump with the patience of a man who had already won. Trump forced a smirk, trying to shake off the unease creeping into his chest. Nice island. What is this? North Korea's summer retreat. Jae-hyuk merely smiled, gesturing toward one of the vehicles. Shall we take a drive? Mark immediately stepped between them. Mr. Kim, with all due respect, we need to know where we are and what the purpose of this is. If you think this is some negotiation tactic, you're sorely mistaken. Jae-hyuk's gaze flicked to Mark, amusement dancing in his dark eyes. Ah, the American instinct. Always assuming everything is a transaction. Some things, Agent Holloway, are not for sale. Trump folded his arms. Yeah, all very dramatic. But here's the thing. You don't keep someone like me hostage without consequences. The second my people realize I'm off the grid, you're going to have a problem. Jae-hyuk exhaled softly, as if Trump's words were nothing more than static noise. You assume too much, Mr. Trump. I did not bring you here to harm you, nor to demand anything from you. No. His voice lowered, steady as steel. I brought you here to teach you. Trump let out a short, incredulous laugh. Oh, please. I don't need lessons from some. Jae-hyuk lifted a single hand, silencing him mid-sentence. The sheer authority in the gesture made Trump falter. Come, Jae-hyuk said simply, turning toward the vehicle. You will understand soon. Mark clenched his fists, eyeing the SUVs warily. Sir, this could be a trap. Trump hesitated again, the unease deepening. But deep down, he knew they had no choice. He wasn't in control. He had to follow. With a reluctant nod, he stepped forward. The doors of the SUV opened, revealing a luxurious interior. But something about the darkness beyond the door felt suffocating. And as Trump climbed in, for the first time in his life, he felt the unfamiliar weight of silence. A silence that belonged to men who had real power. A silence that was far more terrifying than any words. The SUV moved smoothly down an unmarked road, its tinted windows concealing the outside world. Inside, the cabin was unnervingly quiet, the only sound being the hum of the engine. Trump sat rigidly, his fingers drumming against the leather armrest, a forced expression of indifference plastered on his face. Mark Holloway sat beside him, his every muscle tense, eyes flickering between Trump and their captor. Kim Jae-hyuk sat across from them, composed as ever, watching them with a quiet amusement that made Trump's skin crawl. After several minutes of silence, Trump finally spoke. All right, enough with the mystery. You flew me all the way out here, hijacked my damn plane, scared my people, and now what? You gonna give me a lecture? Make me apologize? You wish. Jae-hyuk smiled slightly. Mr. Trump, your words continue to amuse me. But this is not about an apology. Trump scoffed. Oh yeah? Then what the hell is this about? Jae-hyuk leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Trump's with an intensity that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. It is about teaching you what true power is. Trump forced a laugh. Buddy, I've been in power my whole life. I was the most powerful man on the planet, in case you forgot. Jae-hyuk's expression didn't change. No, Mr. Trump, you were merely loud. The words hit differently. Trump's smirk wavered for just a second. Jae-hyuk continued, his tone smooth, deliberate. You believe power is in spectacle, in crowds, in applause. You assume that if you speak loudly enough, the world will listen. But men like you fail to understand the simplest truth. The SUV slowed to a stop. Outside, the landscape was barren, save for a large, dimly lit facility ahead. The doors unlocked with a click. Jae-hyuk gestured toward the door. Come, I will show you. Mark instinctively reached for his concealed weapon, but before his hand even reached his holster, two of Jae-hyuk's men flanked the vehicle, standing at the ready. Their presence alone was enough to send a clear message. Resistance was futile. With a reluctant sigh, Trump stepped out. The night air was thick, humid. The facility ahead looked almost abandoned, but the subtle presence of security cameras and reinforced steel doors suggested otherwise. As they approached, the heavy doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Inside, the lighting was dim, the space eerily quiet. Then, they entered a vast, circular chamber. The walls were lined with screens, each displaying live feeds from around the world. Boardrooms filled with world leaders, secret government meetings, financial transactions worth billions, all happening in real time. Trump's eyes widened slightly. What the hell is this? Jae-hyuk stepped beside him. This is the world's true power structure. The movements behind the curtain. The decisions that shape nations before the public even hears a whisper of them. He turned to Trump, his voice calm but firm. You were never part of this, Mr. Trump. You thought you were. But you were always just a pawn in a game you never understood. Trump swallowed, his bravado suddenly faltering. He tore his gaze away from the screens, his throat dry. You're full of it. I had access to everything. Jae-hyuk cut him off with a quiet chuckle. Did you? He gestured toward one of the screens, where a classified document was being signed in a hidden government facility. Look closely, Mr. Trump. These are decisions that shape the world. Not your rallies. Not your tweets. This is where power truly lives. Trump clenched his fists, feeling the walls close in. Jae-hyuk studied him carefully. You assumed I brought you here to punish you. But I did not. I brought you here to educate you. He turned, walking toward the exit, his voice steady. And now that you have seen the truth, let us see how you handle it. As the doors slid shut behind them, Trump realized, for the first time in his life, that he might not have been as powerful as he once believed. And that was the most terrifying realization of all. The sterile hum of the facility's ventilation system was the only sound as Trump stood in the center of the chamber, his gaze darting between the glowing monitors. The reality of what he was seeing, global transactions worth trillions, encrypted messages dictating the fate of entire nations, backroom deals that had never reached the headlines, made his stomach twist. He had always believed he was at the top, the man pulling the strings, the master of the game. But now, standing in the heart of something far bigger, he felt disturbingly small. Mark Holloway stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. Sir, we need to get out of here. I don't know what Jae-hyuk's endgame is, but this isn't just about teaching a lesson. He's trying to show you that he holds the real power. Trump clenched his jaw, refusing to acknowledge the weight of those words. That's bull. He's just another guy trying to act tough. I know his type. Jae-hyuk's voice interrupted the hushed conversation. No, Mr. Trump, you do not know my type. They turned to see him standing at the far end of the room, hands clasped behind his back, the soft glow of the screens casting shadows over his face. You have spent your life demanding loyalty from others, he continued. But tell me, when the world turned on you, when the applause faded, who remained? Trump's lips pressed into a thin line. Plenty of people. No one. Jae-hyuk cut in, his voice sharp. You built your empire on noise, and when the silence came, your power crumbled. He took a step forward, his gaze piercing. You assumed power was about being seen, but true power. He gestured toward the screens. It exists in the places no one looks. Trump forced a smirk, though it wavered at the edges. Yeah, very dramatic. But you don't have me. I don't answer to anyone. Jae-hyuk smiled faintly, as if amused by the response. Don't you? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tablet, tapping the screen. Within seconds, the monitors shifted, displaying personal details, financial records, private emails. And then, Trump's entire network appeared on the screens. Every asset, every deal, every offshore account, every person he had ever called an ally. Trump felt his stomach drop. What the? Jae-hyuk's voice remained even. This is the foundation of your empire. Every favor, every back channel, every debt you owe. I have them all. Mark inhaled sharply, his pulse accelerating. Jesus. Trump's hands balled into fists. This is illegal. You hacked my. Jae-hyuk simply tilted his head. I did nothing. This information was always there. You were simply foolish enough to believe it was hidden. Trump's breathing turned shallow. For the first time in his life, he truly felt the weight of vulnerability. Jae-hyuk took another step forward, his tone quieter now, more deliberate. I could erase you, Mr. Trump. Not with violence, not with war, but with a whisper. He tapped the tablet again, and one of the screens zoomed in on a financial institution linked to Trump's assets. One message, one transfer, and everything you have built disappears. The room felt suffocating. Trump knew he was bluffing. He had to be bluffing. But something about the calmness in Jae-hyuk's voice, the absolute certainty in his eyes, made the doubt creep in. Mark stepped forward, his voice tight. What do you want? Jae-hyuk regarded him for a moment before turning his attention back to Trump. I want you to understand, Mr. Trump. You were never in control. Trump shook his head, swallowing down the rising panic. You think you're so damn smart. But you don't get it. I always find a way out. Always. Jae-hyuk smiled faintly. And yet, here you are. The words hit like a punch to the gut. The silence stretched, heavy and unyielding. Then, Jae-hyuk turned toward the exit. Come, your journey is not yet over. The doors slid open, revealing the dark expanse beyond. And for the first time in his life, Trump hesitated before stepping for war. The silence inside the facility felt heavier than ever as Trump followed Kim Jae-hyuk through the dimly lit corridors. The glow of surveillance monitors flickered along the walls, each screen showing snippets of powerful men in closed-door meetings. Leaders, bankers, CEOs, all moving pieces Trump had once believed he controlled. But now, with every step he took, he felt those pieces slipping through his fingers. Mark Holloway stayed close, his jaw clenched, his mind racing for a way out. The situation had spiraled beyond anything he could have prepared for. Jae-hyuk wasn't just humiliating Trump. He was rewriting the rules of power in front of them. Finally, they reached a reinforced door. Without hesitation, Jae-hyuk placed his hand on a biometric scanner. A soft click, then the door slid open, revealing a darkened room with a single chair in the center, illuminated by a dim overhead light. Trump snorted. Oh, great. Let me guess. You're going to strap me in, interrogate me? Waterboard me? You people are so predictable. Jae-hyuk didn't answer. He simply stepped aside, gesturing toward the chair. Sit. Mark tensed. Sir, I don't think. I said sit. For the first time, Jae-hyuk's voice carried a razor-sharp edge. Trump hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to resist, to push back. But there was something in Jae-hyuk's stare, something cold, calculating, unshakable. With an irritated grunt, Trump stepped forward and dropped into the chair. All right, you got me. What now? You gonna tell me I've been a bad boy? Make me confess my sins. He smirked. News flash, I don't do regrets. Jae-hyuk's expression remained unreadable. Then, he pulled a small device from his pocket and placed it on a nearby console. A holographic screen flickered to life. What Trump saw next made his stomach lurch. Live footage. A high-level meeting room in Washington, D.C., familiar faces. His former allies. Cabinet members. Business partners. Men who had once sworn loyalty to him. And they were laughing. At him. Trump's smirk wavered as he leaned in. The audio crackled to life. Yeah, it was fun while it lasted, but come on, did you really think he was ever one of us? A chuckle. Man was loud, sure, but loud doesn't mean powerful. It just means he wanted to be. Trump's fingers gripped the armrests. His breathing turned shallow. Another voice spoke, this one belonging to a well-known media mogul. Let's be real. He was useful, a great distraction. But now, he's nothing. Nobody takes him seriously anymore. The conversation continued, a ruthless deconstruction of the image Trump had built for himself. One by one, the voices of men he had trusted, funded, protected, they all turned against him. Jae-hyuk finally spoke, his voice low. These are the men you believed were your allies. The ones you thought respected you. He leaned in slightly. Yet here they are, treating you as nothing more than a punchline. Trump's jaw clenched so tight it ached. Shut off. Jae-hyuk didn't move. Why? You love attention, Mr. Trump. Isn't this exactly what you wanted? Trump's hands balled into fists. I said, shut it off. The screen faded to black. The room fell into thick silence. Jae-hyuk studied him carefully, then spoke in a tone softer than before. Do you finally understand? Trump swallowed hard. Understand what? Jae-hyuk straightened. That true power is never loud. It is never desperate for attention. True power doesn't need to be recognized because it already controls everything in the shadows. He turned toward the exit. And you, Mr. Trump, you were never in control. For the first time, Trump had no retort, no quip, no comeback, because for the first time in his life, he believed it. The weight of Jae-hyuk's words hung in the air like an oppressive fog. Trump sat rigid in the chair, his mind racing to process what he had just witnessed. The men he had trusted, his supposed allies, had discarded him like a broken tool. For the first time in his life, he had no control over the narrative, no way to spin the situation, no microphone to shout into. And that terrified him. Mark Holloway, standing stiffly nearby, finally spoke. All right, enough games. You made your point, Jae-hyuk, but you're playing a dangerous one yourself. If you think you can just... Jae-hyuk raised a hand, and Mark fell silent. I have no interest in harming him, Jae-hyuk said coolly. That is not my goal. He turned back to Trump, his expression unreadable. My goal was to give you clarity. Trump scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. You think you just woke me up to some grand truth? You're full of it. Jae-hyuk smiled faintly. Am I? With a slow, deliberate motion, he picked up a small tablet and tapped the screen. The monitors flickered again. A digital map appeared. At first, Trump wasn't sure what he was looking at. Then his eyes widened. The map showed his entire financial empire. Offshore accounts, real estate holdings, stock portfolios, all meticulously laid out like a chessboard. And then, one by one, the markers began to disappear. Trump lurched forward. What the hell is this? Jae-hyuk's voice remained calm. This is a demonstration. Another tap on the tablet. More assets vanished. Gone. Erased from the system as if they had never existed. Trump shot up from the chair, his breath shallow. Stop. Jae-hyuk did. The screen froze. He tilted his head slightly. Do you understand now, Mr. Trump? Trump's hands were shaking. Not from rage, but from something far worse. Fear. Jae-hyuk took a slow step forward, his voice softer now, almost pitying. You built an empire on perception. You believed power came from the illusion of wealth, of loyalty, of control. He gestured toward the screen. But illusions can be shattered with a single keystroke. Trump's chest rose and fell rapidly. He had faced scandals, lawsuits, betrayals, but never had he felt something so absolute. Jae-hyuk studied him for a moment before speaking again. I could erase everything you own. Right here, right now. Trump swallowed hard. You wouldn't dare. Jae-hyuk's eyes gleamed. Wouldn't I? The room was silent. Then, Jae-hyuk tapped the tablet one last time. Trump flinched, but instead of another asset vanishing, the screen simply went dark. Jae-hyuk placed the tablet down. Your empire still stands. For now. Trump's body sagged slightly, his hands gripping the chair for support. He didn't know whether to feel relief or humiliation. Jae-hyuk exhaled softly. But let this be a lesson, Mr. Trump. True power is never loud. It does not beg for attention. It does not need approval. True power is silent. And when it moves, it is already too late. He turned toward the exit. Your flight has been arranged. You are free to leave. Trump blinked. Just like that. Jae-hyuk nodded. Yes, because you're no longer relevant. The words stung deeper than any insult. Trump clenched his fists, but there was nothing left to fight. Nothing to say. He had spent his life believing he was untouchable, invincible. Now he knew the truth. He had never really been in control, and that realization was the most devastating defeat of all. The return flight was eerily quiet. Trump sat alone in the private cabin, staring out the window as the jet soared through the night sky. Mark Holloway sat a few rows away, pretending to review classified documents, though his eyes flicked toward Trump every so often. Neither had spoken since leaving the island. For the first time in his life, Trump had no words, no sound bites, no quick-witted insults, just an uncomfortable silence that pressed against his chest like a weight he couldn't shake off. Everything he had seen, everything Jae-hyuk had shown him, played over and over in his mind. The betrayal of his allies. The ease with which his empire could be erased. The truth about the world's real power players. And worst of all, Jae-hyuk had let him go. Not because he was afraid. Not because he wanted something in return. But because he no longer saw Trump as a threat. That was the ultimate humiliation. The plane touched down in Washington, D.C. just before dawn. A convoy of black SUVs was already waiting on the tarmac, agents standing by to escort Trump back to his estate. But as Trump stepped off the plane, something felt different. The air was the same. The city looked the same. But he wasn't the same. Mark walked beside him, keeping his voice low. "Sir, I suggest we handle this carefully. The media is already running stories about your mysterious disappearance. We can control the narrative if we move quickly." Trump didn't respond. Mark hesitated, then tried again. "We could spin this. Frame it as a strategic retreat. Maybe even a new campaign." Trump suddenly stopped walking. Mark turned, confused. For the first time, Trump's face was unreadable. "I don't need a campaign," he said, his voice oddly quiet. "Not anymore." Mark frowned. "Sir." Trump took a deep breath. "Take me home." Mark studied him for a moment, sensing something was off. But he nodded and gestured to the waiting SUV. As the car pulled away from the airport, Trump leaned back in his seat, staring out at the city he had once commanded. The crowds would still gather. The cameras would still flash. His name would still dominate the headlines. But he knew the truth now. He had never truly been in control. And worse, he never would be again. If you made it this far, comment where you're watching from and let US know if the story of justice moved you.